Dredge starts off as a nice cozy fishing game. You go around, catching different fish to sell back to the fishmonger, pay off the debt so that you can finally own your own fishing vessel, and of course, dredge up upgrades for your ship so you can get more hull capacity, better engines, all the fun stuff. At least, you'd think that if you didn't go out at night, because once the sun goes down, things start to get spooky. And then there are the unexplained occurrences, the townsfolk that are just a little off, the packages that are just a little wet and slimy, and the fish, which aren't quite right. This leads you to the mystery at the core of Dredge's narrative, where you work with a collector to dredge up artifacts for some unknown reason, all while gaining the blessings of the deep. So as it turns out, there's a little bit more to Dredge than just being a cozy fishing game. In fact, it's a pretty good game if you like a spooky vibe but don't want something that's expressly horror, because Dredge is inspired by cosmic horror. So, the spooky stuff here dwells in that uneasy space, where you think you see something that's not quite right. When you look again, you can't be sure. Of the vast and unknowable things at the bottom of the ocean, as alien as the distant stars. And it does so masterfully. So, come along with me for a journey through Dredge, as I talk about my experiences not only playing the game, but also both the Pale Reach and Iron Rig DLCs. You play as a fisherman who washes up on the dock of Greater Marrows, shipwrecked due to bad luck, or maybe because the ocean was veiled in fog and a rock appeared out of nowhere. But no worries, the mayor has generously loaned you an old fishing boat to get started. And so, that's exactly what I did. I set out and began fishing. And right from the start, I noticed how atmospheric Dredge was. The game's simple art style gives it a cozy feel, at least during the day. Plus, the soundtrack is nice and calming, at least during the day. But how do you fish in Dredge? It's a series of simple minigames. None of them are particularly difficult. For example, the first, a small marker spins around the circle, and you can pull on the line to advance your progress. Hitting one of the green spaces results in that progress increasing, and missing results in progress lost. So why not let the fish reel itself in? Because while you're fishing, sailing around, or just turning your boat, time passes, and things get a bit, let's just say, spooky at night. Later on, some of the mini-games do get trickier. Instead of a bar going in a nice smooth circle, it jumped between a series of bars. And I messed this up an embarrassing amount of times. In fact, even after beating the game, plus both DLCs, I was still messing it up if I rushed instead of waiting to hit things on the backswing. And so I spent quite a bit of time over the first few days catching different fish. And it didn't take long for me to notice that some of the fish weren't exactly normal. These are aberrations. They sometimes appear when you catch fish, and at night you can see an eerie glow above a certain school. That means there's an aberration there. You can also catch trophy fish. This happens when, instead of seeing the regular green marker to hit, there's a gold one. If you hit the gold marker, congratulations, not only do you instantly catch the fish, saving you time, but it's a trophy, higher weight, and therefore more value. But, unlike the regular version of a minigame, if you miss the golden marker, instead of just losing a little bit of progress, you miss your entire chance to catch the trophy. Both trophy fish and aberrations are more valuable than regular fish, though you only get collection progress for aberrations. So, I spent a lot of time filling out my Encyclopedia Fishtanica by collecting all the aberrations. And I'm proud to report that by the end of the game, I caught every fish and every aberration, including the elusive number 230. Oh, by the way, as you're fishing, make sure to return to the fishmonger to sell your catch before they go stale, and keep an eye out for some special requests. You should also keep an eye on the daylight, because when night falls, panic builds and things get genuinely spooky. The fog starts to close in, and you begin to hear some things. Creepy things. Early on, this isn't too bad. You can always stay near the light of the Marrows, and not much is going to happen. Later, it becomes a more serious consideration, especially when you're out on the open ocean and the angry eye above your compass turns orange or red. At that point, you might want to head back to port and sleep it off, as otherwise you might end up chased by horrors from the Hadal depths. And at first, I really did find nighttime to be very spooky, in large part because I didn't know how threatening it was. Is this all really good sound design to form some smoke and mirrors, or am I going to lose my progress entirely and have to restart the game from the beginning if I die? I didn't know the answer to that, so once darkness fell, I would usually quickly return to port, and if I happened to need to catch some nighttime fish, I'd do that and then quickly return to port. I couldn't help but notice after night fell, there was an angry red glow somewhere behind Greater Marrow. And this is about the point where I met the Collector, a strange man who stepped aboard my boat, and he told me to meet him on Blackstone Isle. I was really reminded of Sunless Seas here, specifically the Hunter's Keep questline, where you return to that island several times in an attempt to solve the mystery which transpired there. The Collector needs help in retrieving 5 artifacts from nearby shipwrecks, the first of which is in the Marrows. And this is where dredging, the activity for which the game is named, comes in. Though I suspect that name is not just because of the activity, but also because dredge and dread sound pretty similar. Dredging involves a completely different minigame, where you need to swap between 2 tracks to avoid the gaps. Mistime this, and your dredging will take a considerable amount of time. But sometimes you get lucky, and it's a simple swap. As you dredge, you can find trinkets, which are sold on Little Marrow, materials to upgrade your ship of a dry dock, and of course, these artifacts plus other items used to progress quests. Something else that can be dredged up, and purchased, and sometimes found from quests, is research parts. You use these to conduct research on your ship, unlocking new upgrades, and there's several different trees which you can research. This allows you to unlock more fishing rods that catch a wider variety of fish, engines to get around faster and maybe more efficiently, new crab pots, troll nets, both of which catch fish passively, all sorts of things. Early on, I mostly focused on upgrades that let me catch new types of fish because I wanted to complete that Encyclopedia Fish Technica, which I now realize I could also call a fish dex. In addition, dredging up materials like wood, metal, and cloth is useful for upgrading your ship at the dry dock. My favorite was always the extra hull space, because that way I got to Tetris more fish into my inventory. But there are also dedicated spaces for rods, sometimes shared with troll nets, engines, lights, all of the things that you're using to explore. And so in addition, some of my early upgrade materials went to more rod space so that I could use both a troll net and a fishing rod. Speaking of, I've now mentioned both crab pots and troll nets in passing, but now's a good time to elaborate a little more. Crab pots are something you place in the water. As time passes, they catch crabs. Yeah, it kind of just does what it says on the box. And when you equip your ship with a troll net, it drags behind you, catching fish passively. So these are both a great way to make passive income while dredging, which is very helpful if you are bad at, for example, driving your ship and you hit some rocks. But it should be noted that the troll net in specific does take up valuable space in your hull, and you might need to swap it out for a different rod, depending on what you're trying to catch. Personally, I tend to use most of these when dredging or when completing quests, since I don't need to carry that much, but if I'm just trying to fish and get profit, yeah, I'd still have the crab pots, but the troll net's going to stay in the stash. So after meeting the Collector, I started looking for his artifacts. Sure enough, behind Greater Marrow, near the angry red glow, I dredged up the first one. And this is where the mystery at the center of the game's story comes in, which was a part of the game that interested me the most. It reminded me of Sunless Sea in that it's very character-driven. And yes, Sunless Sea is ostensibly another game about sailing around, but it's really more of a mystery or almost choose-your-own adventure. I got a similar feeling here from Dredge, making some simple choices and looking into the mystery, because this was also around the same time that I found a message in a bottle, left by someone, talking about a small accident they had while sailing around in a newly renamed boat. But surely that's just bad luck, right? You're not superstitious after all. This is the first of several notes that you can find in a bottle, each of which will add some more context to the game's story. Before I knew it, I'd returned to Blackstone Island and returned the artifact to the Collector. In exchange, he gave me a blessing from the strange book that he carries. You could say it's a blessing of the deep. And yes, each time you return with an artifact, you gain a new blessing. The first is haste, which is handy for getting around. Then you can teleport back to Blackstone. You also gain a spell that instantly banishes hostile threats, and one that harvests fish, transforming some of them into aberrations. But for each of these, there's a cost. Your panic builds. Now, during the day, that's not a big deal. Panic will just naturally decrease. At night, you need to be a little bit more careful when using these, as you don't want your panic to get too high when you're too far from a port. But maybe the teleport to Blackstone is going to be handy there. So far, I've talked mostly about the early game, and from here, Dredge has well and truly introduced most of the basics. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what changes in later regions and some of my thoughts as I go along. If you want to know more about how to get started in Dredge, check out my tips and tricks video where I cover some of the early mistakes I made and a few things I learned along the way. Now when I headed off to the Gale Cliffs, the experience changed a bit. Because in the Gale Cliffs and each subsequent area there's some sort of hostile creature. They're all a little bit different. Some of them are easy to avoid. Others can be confronted more directly. In the Gale Cliffs, This takes the form of a gigantic eel that just wants to take a bite out of your ship, which is totally understandable. Ships taste delicious. After running into the creature, it spooked me. So I spent some time catching fish around the outer edges of the cliffs where I knew it wouldn't bother me. I used this time to fill out some new entries in my fish decks and dredge up materials so that I could upgrade my engines. But soon enough, I knew I had to confront the beast if I wanted to progress, because there was an angry red glow and it was blocked off by some rocks, and I needed explosives to destroy them. This led to another realization. I could attempt to outrun the creature, but it was often easier to just go about my business and let it hit me, because after it did, it went back to the depths and left me alone for the rest of the day. This also made it much easier for me to catch the nighttime fish around the cliffs, as before that I took quite a bit of damage banging my ship into the narrow cliffs trying to escape the creature than I did from the creature itself. Just have a backup engine so your engines don't get disabled. And so with a bit of newfound confidence, I did progress some of my quests and got the packed explosives, which can be used to clear debris. Not only do you need this to access the artifact in Gale Cliffs, but later on you can use them to open up access to rare fish or shortcuts that help you navigate other zones. Again, another quick trip back to Blackstone. Now I have a teleport, and I was off to the Stellar Basin, a tropical paradise. And I found that it would not be as easy to dodge the Kraken as it was with fish. In fact, some mistakes here resulted in my first death, which was one of the more freeing things that happened throughout my playtime. Because remember how I said I wasn't sure what would happen? Would it just be game over? Would I lose some progress? Maybe nothing? Turns out you're reset to your last save point, basically whenever you last rested at a dock. Coming to this realization led me to playing more aggressively and spending more time exploring at night. The Stellar Basin is 100% the best place to do this. Not only is it beautiful at night, the coral has an ethereal blue glow, many of the creatures glisten beneath the water, making them easy to spot at a distance, but even the creature in the basin center has a calm blue luminescence. Just stay away from it, or it'll turn an angry red soon enough and start attacking you. On one of my nighttime adventures, I found a stray dog, and this is the first time that I used the Blackstone teleport, as I wanted to spend the night in a safe place. See, whenever your vessel takes damage, there's a chance you'll lose something from your hold, and the dog had come aboard. This was one cargo I didn't want to lose, so I spent the night in safety. Don't worry, the dog found a happy home with a researcher who's stationed in the basin. Speaking of, she asked me to bring her some samples, and soon enough, she was asking for abyssal and hadelfish, which I couldn't catch. So she provided me with a prototype, and this is where the game's fishing really opens up. You can catch almost anything, you just need the right rod. Some fish are found in the shallows. There are a few which are unique to each of the game zones. In particular, you need special rods to catch the fish in the muck of Twisted Strand, and also the fiery waters of Devil's Spine. And then there's the deep ocean stuff, hadal and abyssal, so you spend quite a bit of time reconfiguring your rods based on the fish that you want to catch. Before I get into some of more specialized zones, though, I think now is a good time to talk about the game's first DLC. Now, DLCs often come into play after the game's main story is complete, but I don't think that's the best way to treat or experience the Pale Reach. It's really just another zone with its own unique icy biome that just happens to be unrelated to progressing the main story. When you first head into the ice flow, your movement is very limited because there's floating ice and you don't want to hit it. This also means your first task is to piece together an icebreaker. As you're exploring, you meet up with a photographer who introduces you to this region's beastie, a strange mutated narwhal that just wants some fish and isn't afraid to sink your boat to get them. I'm sure it's a terrifying undersea horror, but honestly I found it kind of cute, especially the way it joyfully jumped on the fish. After assembling my icebreaker, I had a lot of fun smashing through the floating ice chunks throughout the zone. I may have spent more time than I needed to just zooming through to do that and listening to the crunch of ice shattering beneath my bow. Now, the Pale Reach does have its own self-contained story, but there's no collector, no artifact, and no mystery to drive me forward in the same way. As a result, I didn't find the Pale Reach to be that engaging personally. That said, if you are enjoying the gameplay side of Dredge, more so than the mystery and the storytelling, there's quite a bit here. Lots more fish. The fish decks must grow, and some of them are even aberrants. Then in terms of mechanical rewards, you get some cool stuff, and I do mean that quite literally. For example, you can store ice in your hold, which is used to chill fish, keeping them fresh for longer and giving you more time to stay out before you have to return and sell your catch, at least if you aren't filling up your hold too quickly. There's also the Radiant Troll Net, which is downright OP. It holds tons of fish, catches them almost everywhere except for the specialized biomes, and it catches them very quickly. So, again, if you are looking more into the mechanics than the story, I could see this being well worth your time. The game's later two zones, the Mangrove of the Twisted Strand and the Fiery Hellscape of the Devil's Spine, require specialized equipment to catch many of the fish there. In the Twisted Strand, a strange creature known as a Mindsucker hunts you, and unlike the threats from the Stellar Basin or Gale Cliffs, this one is attracted to movement. Hold still, keep a safe distance, and it leaves you in peace. Personally, I found the Mindsuckers in the Twisted Strand rather unnerving as a result. By this point, I had the Banish, so I wasn't really in any danger, but knowing that if I kept my distance and didn't move too quickly, I could avoid confrontation, had me playing more cautiously than I would have otherwise. It certainly didn't help that passage itself within the Strand is treacherous. Visibility is poor, roots extend into the water, and sometimes rise up out of the water to block your path. But if you really want to see a fiery hellscape, that would be the Devil's Spine, where the sea, flame, and madness meet. Another zone where the atmosphere is oppressive. Red skies, volcanic vents beneath the waves, and ancient crumbling ruins rising out of the sea, in a way that evokes a lot of Lovecraft's writing, that often focused on the ancient things falling into or rising out of the ocean. Remember, each zone you explore, when you resolve the story there, yields a new artifact, and once you've gathered all 5, you have a choice. And so next up, I'm going to be discussing the game's endings. If you don't want to see spoilers, feel free to skip ahead to the next segment, which will talk about the Iron Ring DLC. Because after you've gathered all the artifacts, if you give the 5th one to the collector, this is what you see. From the start, I was intrigued with the mysteries around the collector. Why did he want these artifacts? Why are these artifacts corrupting the seas around them? And where did he get that book? After reading several of the messages from the bottles that I collected while sailing, I began to suspect that the collector was the sailor from the messages, the one whose boat sank, the one who lost his wife, and the thing he dredged up, that caused the emptiness in his eyes, was the Book of the Deep. But there's one more twist, and that twist comes with a choice. Because if you explore near Devil's Strand, you can meet the old mayor of Greater Marrow, who tells you to throw the book, bound in crimson and silver, back into the ocean, who pleads with you to not give the final artifact to the collector. And if you instead hide the artifact and demand the book, the illusion is broken. It's revealed the collector is but your reflection, and that you have been trapped in this cycle of madness after fishing the book out of those forsaken depths, and after losing everything as a consequence, your ship, your wife, maybe even your humanity, you agree to throw it back. It's the way the game's central story plays out, and the uneasiness around many of its characters, that makes Dredge such an excellent example of cosmic horror. There is something lurking within the deep, waiting to be awakened. But at the same time, there's a deeply human element. It was a human, the fisherman, who disturbed things by dredging up the Book of the Deep. And throughout the game, there are hints at this. Enough that I suspected who the collector was, but not enough that I actually made the connection that he was the character I was playing, or that he was my reflection. Looking back, this does make sense though, because horrors appeared as panic rose at night, and they seem a little less a physical thing, and a little more a manifestation of a mind, a reflection of a fisherman trapped within horrors of his own making. And so, were any of the horrors real? Well, they certainly seemed real enough to be inhabitants of the Marrows, but they could just as easily be explained by natural events. Was it a gigantic fish that took a bite out of a town? Or did part of a town subside into the ocean, and someone saw an undulation in a wave that looked like a gigantic fish? It's also hard to tell how much of the events were seen through the fisherman's unreliable lens. He's not the most trustworthy narrator. I might make another video diving more into the story elements and how they came together, so let me know down below if that's something you want to see. For now, it's safe to say, if you're a fan of cosmic horror and you're here for the narrative, you will absolutely get a spectacular presentation within Dredge. So, then there is the Iron Rig DLC. I didn't want to talk about this earlier because it doesn't feel like it fits neatly into the game's progression. In fact, a lot of the gear that you get is downright overpowered, so if you do it too early, you might ruin the experience. Instead, it focuses on the Iron Rig. Set up here by the Iron Haven Corporation to drill, consequences be damned. Once you help get the rig up and running, the drill extends down into the ocean floor. The sea splits open, and oil spills out, tainting the pristine vistas. The game becomes a little less cozy here, and a little more of an ecological disaster. And also, several ancient creatures are set free, some of which are quite hostile. So, the main story here is you return to each of the game's zone, catching new fish, and bringing samples back to the scientist while gathering supplies to advance the rig's main story. It was about this point that the fishing started to feel a bit played out to me. Maybe this was because I had spent so much time focusing on completion, and I was approaching completion. Maybe it was because I found the Iron Rig to be very easy, because on top of all the engines, hull space, and powers I had from the base game, I got Iron Rig gear that was even more powerful on top of that. I had a fishing charm, so fishing was super fast. I had highly efficient rods. Everything just felt very easy, and there's even remote repair and tea, which I could consume to instantly clear panic. So now, even the nighttime mechanic wasn't really a thing that I had to deal with or think about. All of the atmospheric elements of Dredge, which drew me in originally, and the mystery that kept me going forwards, were now gone. Yes, there's a little bit more to the story of the Iron Rig. Drilling releases the oil, there's the creatures, there's the monster. You have to prevent the monster from attacking the rig to resolve the story. But there wasn't much mystery here, and I was far less invested in the story of a corporation doing bad things because, I mean, yeah, that's just what corporations do. Meanwhile, the scientist subplot was a little bit more interesting to me. I noticed how he, over time, obsessed over the black substance and slowly descended into madness before, well, I'll just leave you to find out the rest. Let's just say, if you fish beneath the Iron Rig after finishing the story, you might catch something very interesting, and yes, you do need that to complete your fish decks collection. So, whether or not the DLCs are worth it really comes down to why you're playing Dredge. Personally, I'm mixed on them. On the one hand, the Pale Reach and the Iron Rig do a good job of building on prior gameplay mechanics. You have stronger gear, more hull space, new fish to catch, some interesting mechanics like marking fish on your map, new aberrations to find, and even aberrant and exotic bait to make that easier. But neither DLC is connected directly to the main story. Instead, they're tangential, dealing with other struggles and other horrors. I was very satisfied with the way in which new gameplay mechanics were introduced during the game's main story. But by the time I reached the DLCs, they felt a lot more disconnected, and I was kind of tired of a fishing minigame. Story-wise, the Pale Reach was a miss for me. I didn't have enough time to get attached to the characters. I did enjoy a little bit more about the Iron Rig, especially the scientist subplot, and neither DLC took a ton of time to complete. Pale Reach was about an hour, Iron Rig was about 4. But ultimately, I'm still mixed, and I'd say if you're playing Dredge for the gameplay and you want more of it, go for it. But if the story's the main hook, your mileage is going to vary. And so, those are some of my thoughts on Dredge. For October, I'd wanted to play a spooky game, but I didn't want to play a horror game. Very often, horror games annoy me because I can see through the gameplay tropes they're using to create that tense atmosphere, and instead of drawing me in, it very often takes me out. Dredge didn't do that, because yes, it's still having or presenting a spooky atmosphere, but it's more about building tension than it is outright just relying on cheap tricks like a jump scare. Admittedly, if you're going fast and a rock appears out of nowhere, that's kind of a jump scare, but I was much more engaged because of the mystery elements around the game's story than I otherwise would have been. Maybe this is just an example of me playing the wrong horror games in the past. If there are any really good mystery-focused horror games, please let me know down below. I would actually be interested to check those out. Part of the reason why I wanted to do a complete review here is because I liked the base game of Dredge enough to play both DLCs, and I could see a lot of other people doing the same. Now, I did them a little bit out of the order that I talked about them in this video. I actually did the Pale Reach after completing the main story, which was 100% a mistake. Would have enjoyed it more if I did it earlier on. But at the same time, I did come away from both DLCs feeling a little disappointed because of what I personally was attracted to in the game, so I wanted to share that experience. I've also noticed that a lot of reviews for games focus very much on the main game rather than the game and also its DLCs. So I'm going to be trying something where I play not only the base game, but also some DLC content. Also, as you may have noticed, you're seeing more of me in these videos. This is something that I'm going to be doing more often, at least for now. I want to try it out. Why? Because there is so much AI slop that I just want to remind people that yes, there's a person behind all of the videos that I'm making. In the past, I've always wanted to kind of put the game on a pedestal, front and center, to show and immerse you in the game rather than to show you me, a boring average human just like you. But now I feel like showing that I'm real and that I'm a person, and yes, I do make mistakes sometimes, like everyone, is more important. And so I'm going to be doing that more. Now, if you're looking for another review to watch, maybe check out my thoughts on Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It also has some cosmic horror themes, and it is one of the best RPGs I've ever played. That'll be up in the card and down below. Also, if you want more Dredge content, I've got a video with some tips and tricks, and also a video on the best loadout for your boat. Those will also be up in the card and down below. Last but not least, if you want to see all of my content, the best way to do it is joining my Discord, making sure to react to give yourself a community role, and also the notification role. That way, you see all of the videos that I release, rather than just the ones the YouTube algorithm wants you to see. And so thank you very much for watching to the end. Remember to leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.